Good morning, world. Welcome back. This is the Hot Mic Podcast. My name is Nate the Barbarian. Good afternoon for those of you who are joining us live, and a good day to everyone. Whenever you join us, we're up on Facebook and on YouTube. At YouTube, we're at Hot Mic Podcast HQ. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me bring in the rest of the panel, and we will get the conversation started. Today, we got Kevin Aldridge with us. How you doing, Kevin?
Good. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Good to see you, sir. And Tarris, Troy Horton. How you doing, Troy?
Glad to be here. One of my favorite times of the week right now.
I appreciate you, bro. And Phil Hemlich. How you doing, Phil?
Well, I can't say it's my favorite time of the week, but it's certainly up there.
Okay. Appreciate that. Appreciate the love. Let's get straight into it because, as always, there's a lot going on. Well, I mean, the Hamilton County coroner gave some of the details on a preliminary to the autopsy. And I think the big takeaway was the fact that Ryan Horton was shot in the side. He wasn't shot in the front. He wasn't shot in the back, per se. He was shot in the side. And you know what? From looking at the circumstances, this is just my opinion. I'll make a bold statement about this. In my opinion, in this circumstance, him being shot in the side is tantamount to him being shot in the back. Clearly, if you look at that video, he is running away from the officer. I don't think this officer should remain a Cincinnati police officer after this incident. That's just my two bold statements. But what do you think? You agree, disagree? What do you think?
I totally disagree. Go ahead, Kevin.
No. Go ahead, Phil. Go ahead.
I totally disagree, and I would just point out that when you take a situation where there's a police shooting, and there's, at least so far, there hasn't been a demonstration of the officer acted wrongly before all these investigations, to come out and say essentially that he murdered the guy and he ought to be thrown up the force. With all due respect, I think that's reckless and irresponsible. And you know what it does? It takes away, when you have a situation where a police officer really acts unlawfully, you lose your credibility. If there's always a protest and always an accusation, anytime there's a police shooting, or at least a white officer shooting a black guy, and you protest or you claim he broke the law, the officer did, every time, you lose credibility. Now, let me ask this question. This guy was in the car. Was he driving the car? Is that not clear?
I do not have that knowledge.
Yeah, I don't think we know.
All right. Well, he was the only one in there, wasn't he? In the car,
there were like three. I think there were four.
Okay.
There were four people.
Okay. He's in the car. He's got a gun. Now, he either had the gun in two places in the car. He either had it in the car, sitting in a compartment, or he had it in his pocket.
So
now,
what?
I'll tell you what. He had different choices. When he got out of there, if he had no intention to shoot these cops, if he had no intention, he would have either left the gun in the car or at least kept it in his pocket. He runs out with the police there with the gun in his hand. Okay? And to me, that shows right there. You don't run in front of cops with a gun in your hand unless you intend to use it. So whether he was, they saw the gun and it was dark. And excuse me.
Come on,
in
Phil.
my view, without knowing anything else, if they see a guy running with a gun in his hand, they do not have to get out of binoculars and see, was he pointing it at us or is he pointing it somewhere else?
Ryan Hinton did not deserve to die. He was clearly running away, and the facts.
With Phil, a gun in his hand.
The facts tell us that he had no ill intent in terms of deadly intent toward the officer.
Why did he have a gun in his hand? Why did he have a gun in his hand?
It doesn't matter why he had a gun in his hand. It doesn't matter why he had a gun in his hand. We know
there's cops and they're chasing you and you've got a gun in your hand. What's the point of having it in your hand?
No doubt.
Here's Phil, where I think you're wrong. Here's where I think you're wrong on this, Phil, is we can't get into the mind. This is the difficult part of these types of things, is you can't get in the mind of Ryan Hinton and what he was thinking and what his intentions were, just like you can't get in the mind of the police officer and know what his intentions are. In my estimation here, the one thing that I will agree with that Phil said is, I do still think that we need to wait to see about some more information that comes out. I think certainly what the coroner's report illustrates is what many of us thought and what many people thought they saw in the video, which was at best when the officer fired shots at him, he was lateral to the officer, if not running away from him. And I think the injuries definitely go against the chief's initial report that the young man was shot in the chest. Although when you talk about consistencies in the stories, apparently he did have an exit wound. It was a matter of a question of whether the chest wound was an entrance wound or an exit wound. It was kind of presented by the police chief as if it was an entry wound, like he had been shot in the chest. But it turns out from the autopsy, it sounds like the bullet kind of ricocheted around in there and exited out through his sternum, which would explain the injury there. Now, whether that was bad information that the police chief had or whether she was intentionally trying to misrepresent that, we don't know. She'll have to answer that question as to where she got that information from and why she presented it that way. But
I will say, at the very latest, she should have waited until she knew for sure what it was.
Whoa. Every time that happens, the community gets angry and they say, we want the information now. We want it now. So you're saying, oh, you want the police to hold back on releasing information until everything's clear. You can't have it both ways.
Is that a question?
So here's what I think they should follow the same axiom that we try to follow, not always successfully in the news business, but sometimes it's better to be accurate than fast, right? And so this is one of the things that the community has to get aware of is that if you want the most accurate information, that's not going to be information that comes quickly. And if the information sometimes comes too quickly, it may not be the fullness of the facts. And the trap that you can fall in is that information changes, facts change as you get autopsy results, new information comes to bear. And what the community doesn't always respond well to is when information initially reported changes, right? Then that becomes an issue. So I think that is
then the person gets accused of lying when they were just trying to get out what they knew at the time.
That is what the community and the powers that be have to come to grips with is it better to say to the community, hey, we know you want answers, but we want to get you the right information. So you're going to have to be okay with waiting. And you're never going to satisfy people 100% of the way. There's still going to be people who are going to say, if you tell them to wait, that they think you're cooking the books and that you're trying to come up with stuff. So you're never going to please anybody, no matter what stance you take. But the best stance that you can take is to always take your time and come up with the best information. And that way you don't have 4 or 5 different press conferences jockeying with each other. Look, all of these officials, the official sources need to be on the same page. Coroner, police, prosecutor. Those 3 arms need to be speaking from the same set of facts and with the same, with the same positioning. Not saying that they're colluding, but I'm saying that they should, at a minimum, they should be operating off of the same set of facts that they're presenting to the public. That didn't really happen in this case, and now you've got somewhat of a mess.
Yeah,
because you had the police chief come out super quick. Now the coroner's putting out her information, and some stuff doesn't seem to be matching up. That's just not a good look for from the official capacity, I would say.
Ryan Hinton was shot in the side, which in my opinion in this case is the same as being shot in the back. It was clear that he was not a threat to the officer. You can see this in the video.
Oh, that's ridiculous to say.
It is clear that he was not a threat to the officer. And you want to know how we know? And this is just facts, Phil. This is not going to be my opinion.
Well, facts are he had a gun in his hand when he.
The facts is that he never fired a shot.
Oh, so you
never fired a shot.
Let me ask you this: if he points his gun at the cops, are you okay if they shoot him?
The facts don't get away from this point, Phil.
No, I know.
The fact
I want to understand where you're coming from. If he had
I'm coming from the facts, Phil. Ryan Hinton never. You're trying to make. You're trying to make you and maybe those who are, pro police and want the officer to be exonerated for whatever reason. And they don't really want us to think about this. They don't really want us to think about this. They want us to feel about this. But here you are telling me that this man was such a dangerous threat. He had a weapon. He never turned toward the officer in the video that I saw and pointed at him.
So that's what I'm trying. If he had, would you say the shooting was
never
okay?
fired a shot.
I'm
So if
trying to
he
understand
wanted
your
to fire at the
criteria.
officer,
I am
why
trying to
didn't he
understand-
fire at him?
I'm trying to
Because he
understand your
never really wanted to fire at the officer.
I'm
That's
trying to
why.
understand your criteria. This is why I'm asking you this question. What criteria you have where it would have been okay for them to shoot him? If he had turned and pointed the gun at the officer, and you could see that, would it be legitimate and lawful for the officer to shoot him? Yes or no?
But I think most people would agree in that case. Yeah.
No, I'm asking you.
I just answered it. Yeah,
Okay.
I think most people will agree.
So you're saying the difference
in that
is
case.
if he points it at the officer versus if he's just carrying it. Is that what you're saying?
So I missed the second part of what you said.
You are saying that if he points the gun at the officer, because I thought for a minute that you said you have to wait till he fires the gun, but it sounds like you're not saying that. You're saying that if he points it at the officer, then it's lawful to shoot him. But if he's pointing it somewhere else, like in the sky or the ground, that's an unlawful shooting. Is that your position?
What I'm saying is that this officer should never be on the Cincinnati police force moving forward.
Well,
he is
you've
reckless.
got a solution in search of a problem. That's what you.
No, I do. The problem is this officer and his bad decisions. He's a threat to public safety.
Yeah,
and as a resident of Cincinnati, I don't feel safe with him on the force.
That's my thing. I want to know. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
That's what I want to. When are we going to hold police officers who do wrong accountable? I mean, it's clearly that the information that came out first was false. Okay, so let's move forward. And this police officer who did, okay, now we know the information was false and we have the information now. My question to all this is, when are we going to start holding these police officers accountable for when they do make a mistake? Not all police officers are good. This might be one that might have made a mistake. And like I said, in the past, we need to look into his video game playing activity, all these kind of things. Whenever we see that is this a game of friendly baseball? There was a game a song back in the day, a friendly game of baseball. Talk about situations of this. Are they taking? Was this a game to them where they sat and watched these kids for 2 hours? And yet, no, the kid was not driving. He jumped out, dropped, and I don't see. I mean, now the coroner reports coming out that he was not shot in the chest as they said. You know, and I'm coming from a perspective of someone who has went joyriding in a car when I shouldn't have before with guns.
When the cops got there, did you run around with a gun in your hand?
Thank God I was protected from any kind of altercations with the police officers. I mean, but I have been pulled over by the police department before, guns put in my face and without in my hand.
Did you have a gun in your hand? Okay.
No.
You know, I think one of the challenges here is like everybody's trying to do this mental gymnastics to try to get into some kind of mindset of what the officer's motivation was or what Hinton was thinking. I don't think any of those things, I won't say that they don't matter, but the more important things that you got to be looking at is, did the officer follow policies and procedures? What do the coroners report, the autopsy, the wounds show? Because what you're talking about here is, if you want to say that this officer murdered this young man, okay, then you are going to have to some degree, prove that intent to where he was spouting off with his partner before he got out there. Hey, I'm gonna go out here and shoot me a black one today or something like that. Like you've got to prove some type of motivation here. There's a difference between murder, which is intent, and maybe negligence or recklessness. Those are two different things. So you might be able to say that, yeah, this officer here was negligent or he was reckless in terms of whether he followed the proper procedures, whether he shot the kid, whether he was running away. I think those are two different sort of like legal determinations in terms of murder versus recklessness. Now, the end result is the same. The young man is dead. But I'm talking about from a legal standpoint and what you can probably prove in a court of law to use to kind of sort of make that determination of saying that, this guy was intent on creating like some kind of cold-blooded murder. I don't know that we can get into his head like that.
And maybe not
any more than you can get into Ryan Hinton's head, any more than you can get into Ryan Hinton's head and say that his intention was to threaten and shoot that police officer, to when it looks to a lot of people who are watching the video that the kid was just trying to get away. I mean, to me, I think most people watching that video, it's very hard to make a case that he came out of those garbage cans and was even facing the officer, let alone sort of threatening him.
Didn't the officer say on the tape he's got a gun? Am I right about that?
He did. His partner said that.
Partner said the guy's got a gun. Right.
And in this situation where this is unprecedented, it's never happened again, this is an opportunity for us to make change. So if this has never happened before, how about we put laws where officers eliminate qualified immunity first and foremost, and then we officers like this, when they do have shootings like this, like Kevin just said, we go through and we have a group of people, a jury, go through and see if it was reckless, or if it could have been prevented, and a group decide it could have been prevented. That's when we go after this dude's, not just criminally, but civilly. We start hitting these police officers in their pocketbooks and in their retirement. They'll stop hunting black men. I do believe that.
Yeah, I mean, we got to figure this out because it's an open carry state. And I'm not saying that I don't, understand that that's a difficult situation. You ask yourself, what would you do? But, that's a fair thing to look at yourself. But, I'm not in that situation, and I'm in the situation that I am, and I'm looking at the video and I'm listening to what the police chief said, and it just ain't matching up. And, nobody should die for, a car or a vehicle. It just puts the officer in a bad situation. It puts the community in a bad situation over a car.
Yeah. So don't steal cars and don't carry guns. How about that?
It's an open carry state, Phil. So we need to figure out, we got to figure out what that means for us. Because there's a piece of me, and again, I don't want to get into the ifs and buts and conjecture, so I'm not even going to bring it up. But, I mean, listen, it would have been totally legal for Ryan Hinton to have a sidearm holster if he wanted to and run away. It's Ohio. It's open carry.
Well, I think Nathan, one of the things though that you do have to acknowledge, just in fairness, is that when an officer gives you an order, like, you need to comply. So nobody is saying that you don't have the right to legally open carry, but if a police officer tells you to put your weapon down, then you have an obligation under the law, I think, to do that. And it's probably smart if you do that, particularly if you are a black person. I mean, look, they're not going to, if you look at that, and they're not going to give you more than a couple of seconds to comply with that if you got a weapon in a threatening situation. I mean, if you think about, you watch most of these instances, they're like, hey, drop it, bam, bam. It's like you barely got a second. You barely got a second or two to comply with those orders. So, I mean, I think the one thing that I would say that objectively that you have to include in that is that when police officers stop you and they give you an order, there's an obligation. There's an obligation to comply with those orders. And if you don't, then you kind of open yourself up to that.
I don't think it's that black and white. I don't, and I resist the notion of what you're saying. No, because
so if an officer tells you to freeze and you take off running, then that is, you don't see that as,
and
you
they
don't
shoot me in. We'll finish it all the way out, Kevin.
No. I'm just, no, let's
if
just,
an officer tells me to freeze,
we don't need to finish it. We don't need to finish it.
We do have to finish it. If
no,
an officer tells me
I'm
to
just
freeze,
asking you a simple question. If an officer
tells me a simple
Nathan,
question
this is a simple yes or no question, and I know you don't want to answer, but it's a simple yes or no question. If an officer tells you to freeze and you don't freeze, are you violating the law?
Now we change. That's not the real issue. Here's what the real issue.
No, it starts at the crux of the issue.
It doesn't start the crux. It does.
Okay,
it does.
okay,
You're right. It does start, but where it goes is to where we need to be having this community conversation. Our community conversation is this situation is officer says stop. Suspect has a weapon. Now, does it matter whether he's got a hip piece? He's got a hip holster. Right? Are we going to look at that as the same as if he has the gun in his hand, he's running with the gun? All I'm saying is that if an officer says freeze and I'm running away, that doesn't give him the right to shoot me in the back.
No, I'm not saying that it does.
It sounded like you were saying that.
No, here's what I'm saying. And this, every time I get into this is always the point that people miss, is that there are escalatory states, right? There are escalatory states that generally start with compliance or a failure to comply, right? So if an officer tells you to
But
freeze,
it don't match in this situation though, Kevin, because I didn't hear the officer say stop or anything. I heard officers say gun, 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 and he just opened fire. I had to go back and look at the video. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I can't remember whether they said that or not. But I guess my general point is that when you are approached by a police officer and your initial reaction is to run, what am I
shot in the back?
What? No, I'm not, Nathan. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that when you do that, it leads police officers to go to the next step, which is
to shoot you in the back or the side.
No. They
But
wouldn't
that's
have
what we're
shot
talking about here, though, Kevin.
But Nathan, first of all, they wouldn't have shot the young man if he didn't have a gun. Okay, so you are not. You
don't know that. You don't know that.
All of the pieces.
You do not know that, Kevin. You have no idea. There's been too many black men who were shot, who were unarmed for you to say that. That is not true. That is not true. You don't know that.
Okay.
They could have got spooked and thought they saw a gun. How many times we heard that? I mean, the officer
I guess I can't. I guess we're just gonna have to agree to disagree on this. But I just think you can't get away from the escalatory actions of people who do not listen to police orders in the commission of a crime. It escalates the situation for those involved, and it typically does not end well. And that's what you don't want to acknowledge. I think it's the thing.
That's what you don't want to acknowledge.
I think it's the thing that Phil kind of says. Look, you got to think rationally. If I'm coming up on criminals who've stolen a car, one, they're already criminals. Okay, this I know.
They are not already criminals.
Secondly, they are criminals.
They are not criminals. A criminal is someone who has been convicted of a crime.
Okay.
They are alleged to have. That
Nathan.
matters, man. We can't gloss over that.
You're right, Nathan.
I know.
Chances are, if those young men get arrested and they go to court, they're going to get charged. These are just
public defenders, and they're going to have to plead out because we got a messed up system where people at the bottom can't really afford to have adequate legal protection.
So who's defense? You said Clyde Bennett's not adequate for the father. That's the attorney. He's not adequate attorney. Is that what you're saying?
I see what you're doing there, and I wouldn't say that about Clyde Bennett. I see what you're doing. That's interesting. That's a good point. Good point. Fair point.
Can I read something from a Supreme
Court? I just don't like the
case?
way you rock back in your chair right there. You kind of did a little something with your tongue.
Did I? I'm sorry.
Kind of like,
sorry.
I got Nathan. I didn't like it.
I got him.
Letting you know.
I don't like it. Let me read you I just looked this up. The leading kind of Supreme Court case on excessive use of force claims against police officers. What it says is they are to be evaluated using, quote, objective reasonableness as the standard, taking into account that, quote, police officers are often forced to make split-second judgments. And they say that the use of force by the officer should be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene rather than with 20/20 vision of hindsight and in light of the facts and circumstances confronting them.
All right. Well, as we've been talking, the Ohio Attorney General had a big old press conference where he denounced the multiple efforts for people to raise funds, money for Ryan Hinton. He said that, basically he's against it. And, listen, if you're a Republican, if you're like a super pro law enforcement person and you're looking at this situation, I get it. I understand. You're right. The man was defenseless. He had nothing to do with it. He was targeted. JD and others, JD Vance, have been using he was assassinated. They're saying that the Hamilton County Sheriff Deputy was assassinated. Is there truth to that in your opinion?
I'll give them that. I'll give them, just like Ryan Hinton was murdered and assassinated.
Come on, Tarris, you're equating those two.
Well, murder is illegal.
I said it.
Is it?
I hear you. I think they're playing a game.
Shooting with the guy who drove his car to the deputy. You equate those?
I believe that he assassinated. Yeah, I believe Brian, when the Hinton father saw those, when he saw that, and he saw that they were going to try to make this shooting out to be something that wasn't from the get-go, he's like, y'all got the wrong one. So he sought out and assassinated that.
But you're telling me that the killing of Ryan Hinton is that the killing of the son was equivalent to the guy who drove his car into that deputy.
Phil, I want you to hear me on this one. I want you to hear me when I say this. It's not just it's when you talk about life. You had one officer and 5 black people gone from society. So you talk about an officer. Why is the officer's life? Why is the officer's life more important than the Hinton son who's gone? The 3 other people who are in the vehicles who are going to be charged with crimes, whose lives will never be the same, and their families. And it's a mess all around. And then Hinton, the driver it's 5 black men taken out, and Hinton and his
taken out. Did they shoot the other guys? You're saying
taken out of society. You talk okay. You're missing the point. Where I'm trying to say you're missing the point. In society, at the beginning of the day, when those police officers will watch those kids sleep for 2.5 hours, called in other officers. The bang bang events happen, and there where we are right now, 5 black men are gone from society, and one white officer's life is gone. So I do equivalate the black kid being gone to the white officer being assassinated. I look at it both as death, but I look at on the black community side, we've got 5 that were gone. 5
You're
people
saying 5?
taken out of society.
Gone. 5 people killed. What do you mean gone?
Futures change, lives completely change, taken out of the society.
Do we know what they were charged with and what the result was of the other guys? Do we know?
At this moment, well, okay, so we're talking about death for death. We had 1 black Hinton death, 1 black Hamilton sheriff death.
I'm talking about your 5 people are gone statement. That's what I'm focusing on.
The
I think he means they're going to go to prison.
They're going to go to prison. They're going to be their lives are gone. They're going to go. They're out of society. Is what I'm saying.
Depends. I think a lot of that terminology usage is hyperbolic. I mean, I think when you want to add terminology in there, such as assassinations or executions, those are incendiary terms. I think to Tarris's point, look, you've got 2 lives that were lost in this situation. And that's really what you need to be talking about. The unfortunateness of the officer who was killed and the young man who was killed. And I agree with Tarris that to the family members and those who are left behind to deal with this, the pain is no less biting, stinging for either of those families. And so I think we do a disservice when you try to politicize things, with incendiary words like that. Sure, if you want to look at a technical definition of what assassination is, right? It's the willful killing, by a sudden or secret planned attack of a person, usually somebody who is prominent, right? And it's done for like political or ideological or kind of like religious reasons. So we usually tend to associate the terminology of assassination with like presidents, Martin Luther King, like that. That's generally when you sort of tend to use those types of languages in terms of assassination. I mean, average people can be assassinated too, I guess. But generally, when we talk about it, there's usually some sort of cause or something behind it. So I guess if you wanted to sort of abide technically by that definition, you could say maybe J.D. Vance is technically right. A Hamilton County Sheriff's deputy would be a prominent person. You could say that the father's actions were a sudden action that was based in I don't necessarily know if you would want to call it politically motivated, but he was definitely motivated by the death of his son. So I guess technically, if you wanted to make that argument, I guess you could say that, but I don't think it's, using words like that help with the situation.
What do you think about
the temperature unnecessarily?
Yeah. What do you think about Yost here talking? Let me play a little bit of this actually. Sorry about that. I thought you guys were actually able to see that. I realized I didn't put the video up. But that was the Ohio Attorney General Yost, who I believe dropped out of the gubernatorial race. Is that correct, race?
I think he's still in it, isn't he? I think he's still in it, barely.
I thought I read that he jumped out. If he didn't, my bad. Looks like it's all tied up.
Either way, what he did was disgraceful because he was playing. He wants to win a primary either for this one or the next one. It's same with Vance. They're playing. It's a base play, is what it is, and what they're doing is exploiting the pain and suffering of, as you guys said, all the people involved. They're exploiting that for their own political advantage, and I think it's disgraceful.
He did drop out, Nathan.
I had to make the point though that
he did drop out. He suspended his campaign.
Okay.
So he's effectually out. So you were right.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, I mean, again, I'll just make this point. Like, this is the kind of situation with this Hamilton County Sheriff Deputy. Again, condolences to the family and friends. Just terrible. Where this man had nothing to do with the situation. And, you know, simply because of his uniform, it's like the classic textbook thing that you hear police saying when they talk about police safety, when they talk about people targeting them. And then this situation happens. And, you know, it's like everything that they've been telling us that they fear. And I think a part of the conversation has to be a recognition of that on some levels. I don't think it takes away from, you know, how I feel about the whole situation. Like I told you, I mean, I think it starts with those young men who started the ball rolling, but I also believe the Cincinnati Police Department, you know, they could have been better. They could have handled it differently and not chased them down. And after that, you know, it's just a bad situation for everybody. But what do you make about these efforts to stop the family from raising money? And I'm like,
are they trying to stop them, or are they just criticizing, or it's one and the same?
I feel like, again, once again, great distinction. Yeah, they'll probably say they're criticizing it. I feel like they're trying to stop the family from raising money. And I'm like, look, whether we think he is guilty or not, the man still deserves the ability to put together a proper defense, right? Like, this is a textbook conversation or textbook case of, like, it really is all about your rights, because it looks like, by all accounts, that the man was involved in the situation, right? Was involved in a homicide. That's what it looks like. So perhaps his involvement's not in question, but the fact that making sure that he gets due process, that the system works the right way, even for him, is good for all of us, right? That's just how I look at it.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's entitled to a vigorous and the best defense that he could possibly put up, regardless of what you think about his guilt or innocence. And people have the right to take their hard-earned money and spend it however they want to spend it, and give it to however they want to give it. I don't have to agree with it, but certainly we live in a country where part of the freedoms that we enjoy means sometimes you got to stomach and look at things that other people do that you don't like, or that you find in poor taste. Like, I find some people who would donate to Donald Trump's campaign distasteful. And again, not likening it to the same thing as these circumstances, but I'm saying that people raise money all the time for all sorts of things that we don't agree with. And that's part of the freedom, you know, that we have in this country. And so you can hate, you know, Rodney Hinton, you can hate what he did, you can think he's guilty as hell. But in America, he has the right to a defense. He has the right to raise money for that defense. And if people want to support that, they can support that. Just like I think the Attorney General or whoever else has the freedom to say that they don't like it. And if they want to try to put pressure on individuals to not allow that, like, that's as much the American way as possible. It's no different than if you want to put pressure on Target or Walmart or whomever because they're supporting Trump and his anti-DEI, you want to put pressure on them to get them to capitulate and say, no, we need to continue these programs. And again, I'm not liking it. I'm saying we put pressure on organizations all the time that do things we don't agree with. And so it's no different if I don't agree with a crowdfunding source allowing him to raise money. I may try to put pressure on them. I may try to voice my opposition, hoping that they'll change their position. That's the American way, right? So they have the right to try to raise the money. People have the right to to say they don't like it, and if they can, bring pressure to bear to try to stop that from not happening. Right? That's how we do things.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Like you guys are right. They're trying to politicize this thing. They're trying to any chance they get to politicize this, they're going to. They're going to try to use. I've been saying this. They're going to try to use Cincinnati 2025's mayor election to catapult to what they're going to do for 2026, and anything they can do to stoke the fire, they're going to try to do it. So I believe that what Yost just did was political grandstand.
You want to hear a similar example? It may be on our agenda today. And Vance, of course, who has no shame, is one of the people, or maybe the main person. We find out that Biden has cancer. I mean, even Trump amazingly had the graciousness to just wish him well, pray for him that. But for Vance and others to, oh yeah, I hope he recovers, but this shows that he wasn't really himself, or he shouldn't have been in office. I think it's disgraceful. It's shameful for someone who has developed what looks like a deadly disease, for somebody to try to make political hay out of that just makes me sick.
But the same thing on the other side. If it was Donald Trump that had it, you'd have people who were saying they were happy that Donald Trump had it and would be so happy. So I understand what you're saying, Phil, but it works. And I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden, but I wish him the best and all the prayers, because nobody you separate that kind of stuff. But just like on the other side, you're saying that you're disgusted with people who might, the JD Vances, on the other side, if Donald Trump had this, you'd have people who, and here's
I complimented Trump a minute ago. I said Trump, to his credit, basically just said he and Melania were praying for him, wished him well, which to me was the right statement and a gracious statement.
But an interesting point, if Joe Biden would have not took the debate, and they could have kept him away for a little bit, and Joe Biden, I do believe Joe Biden would have beat Donald Trump. I do believe that. Then this unfortunate events would have happened. Kamala Harris would have been the vice president. And then, so I think it might have been a little premature to pull him, with hindsight, that's where my mind went with it. I was like, this gets, because it goes back to, I don't know which president it was. It might have been Gerald Ford that said, if there's going to be the first woman president, it's going to be here's how it's going to happen, either on the Democratic side or the Republican side. A man's going to be the president, and the woman's going to be the vice president. And the man's going to either be assassinated or killed or fall ill. The woman's going to be the vice president by default. And that would have been the case of events if Joe Biden would have beat Donald Trump. But that's just a side note. That's something I've thought about the cancer thing.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there. The only exception I take is when you said, like, if you flip it and it was Donald Trump. And I thought about it. So, like, let's say Donald Trump had, been announced that he's got the same thing that Joe Biden has. But this happened maybe 2 years ago when Kamala Harris was the vice president. Her statement would have been nothing like JD's statement.
I agree with that.
It would have been
And
nothing
look, when
like
Trump was assassinated,
I
I don't remember anybody on the
true.
Democratic side. I don't remember anybody saying anything other than we wish him best, the best when Trump was shot. I don't recall anybody trying to turn that against him or against his party.
Yeah, I understand what Tarris was saying, but I think I agree with what Nathan was saying too. I think it matters who it comes from. So to Tarris's point, absolutely, there would have been people on the Democratic side, maybe not in Congress, maybe not the vice president or the president, but certainly people who identify as liberals or Democrats who would have had less sensitivity. I mean, I think you even heard in some circles after Trump's assassination, again, the internet does what the internet does, but there were some people who were making statements online and whatnot. Hey, sorry, dude, missed. I mean, you're always going to get that element. I think the difference is, to Nathan's point, what we're seeing in this instance is you got the vice president of the United States who doesn't even have the decency to sort of wait, or, like, as soon as the information comes out, like, you don't try to make it like political immediately. There are plenty of other people who would have carried that water who weren't him, that he didn't need to say that. Like, there were going to be other people out there, whether it's conservative news columnists, or you let other people carry that.
Anybody
water.
who would say it has no class, commentator or politician.
Look, here's what I'll say is, to Tarris's point, these are the times that we live in. And I've said this, that the social media age, the biggest casualty is human decency. Like if you are expecting a ton of human decency these days, that ship has sailed, man. I'm telling you, you are living in a bygone era. Class, good taste, those things are out of the window. Like I said, with social media and the internet being what it is, people say all kinds of stuff and they don't wait, right? And that's why it matters like who your leaders are. Like you don't want your leaders to become like the internet, right? Like that's where we've seen like a lot of slippage is like people who are in leadership, they're no better than what you see like online and like a lot of these conversations and stuff. And that's where our society has degraded, is that and again, I'll give Trump credit for now, but it'll be interesting to see how long he can resist the temptation to throw a dart at Joe Biden. Give him credit for a couple of days, but I don't know how much longer he'll be able to hold that powder.
I mean, I'm just so sick of hearing Republicans talk about Biden. And now the media is picking back up on this story. I think Jake Tapper's got a new book coming out sometime this week, along with the people over at Axios. And it's all about the fact that the Biden administration's team hid from the public just how severe Joe Biden's cognitive decline was. And I thought to myself, this is all politically motivated, but you know what? I'm glad they did, because aren't we supposed to project strength? Wouldn't that be America first? Right? I just, it's just whatever it takes with these people when it comes to Joe Biden. But that story's out there now again, what they hid his cognitive decline. And I'm thinking to myself, we're watching Donald Trump not be all the way here, right? He gets a free pass. But I'm supposed to focus on the man who used to be the president. Like, why does this matter?
I agree. And when my father was like in his 90s, and he was obviously getting forgetful, okay, but he was still capable. If you talk to him about some scientific or medical thing, he could go through the whole thing top to bottom. So it isn't this, he's either out of it or he's not. As people get older, they become more forgetful, as was shown in that debate, but it doesn't mean for the last 2 or 3 years that he was in office that he was totally like had dementia or something. That's just a lot of BS.
Yeah,
well, whoever was running it, if he was out of it, whoever was running it, I want them back, because they did a heck of a better job than Trump is doing.
Here's the one point where I would disagree with you on this, Nathan, where like, why should you care for a guy who's not president? I mean, I do think that there is, and again, I'm not saying that any of this is true or that it is the case. I were to say that if it was true that there was information about Joe Biden's health, whether it be the cancer, whether it be some sort of mental diminishment of his faculties, and there was some sort of grand cover up to keep that out of the general knowledge of the public, I do think that that's a big deal, because it gets back to transparency. It gets back to cover-ups and how honest the government is being with the American people, particularly when it's the president of the United States. So I don't think we should ever, whether we favor the candidate or we don't, I don't think we should ever get in a position where we're saying, okay, critical information like that, if true, if it's being withheld from the American public, that's never a good thing, whether that's Donald Trump or whether it was Joe Biden. And, as some people are saying, which again, I always take this stuff with a grain of salt and don't necessarily buy into it. But, if you're one of those people who want to believe that, the media was somehow involved in some broader cover up of this, if that were to be true, that should also be something of concern to the American people, because it would hit directly to the credibility of trust of news sources and whether you could trust them or not. So I'm not sloughing it off as if it, not anything that we should be concerned about. I'm just saying we've seen no evidence to the contrary to suggest that any of that is true, and most of it is speculation.
Yeah, I hear you. I just don't agree with you, Kevin. I don't, man. I don't agree with you, because, like, what will be the usefulness in 2025 of doing some grand investigation of what Joe Biden's cognitive ability was. He's no longer the president. And we got a crazy person in the White House. So why would we do that?
Feeding
Like
the sheep.
Why would we spend any time on that whatsoever?
Feeding the sheep
Well, I'm not
like
suggesting
that.
that there should be. I'm not suggesting that there could be any investigation. I mean, Joe Biden, if he wanted to, could shut it down overnight by just simply, releasing his medical records. I mean, if he really wanted to shut down all of the noise, and granted, that's an incredibly personal thing. But if he wanted to, he could shut it all down, just like Donald Trump could have shut it all down by releasing his tax records. And so, again, health and medical records are a little bit different. I get that. They're more personal. But if it was that big, which it's not, obviously it's not a big deal to Joe Biden and his folks, but I'm just saying that, they could shut that down overnight.
I think they're just.
It just feels like ageism.
Yeah, they're just feeding the sheep what they want to hear. Like Kevin was alluding to, like they're going after the mass media. They're going after the mainstream media after they got Stephanopoulos, and now they're going after 60 Minutes, and that's what was that? ABC and CBS. That's 2 in a row. NBC is the only one that they haven't really gone after because NBC is playing along with the game for the most part. So I see this as an attack. This is just more news. Anything they can get that's newsworthy that they can feed along to their base, their MAGA base. You know what I'm saying? Because that's my opinion. They got Joe Biden's health.
Yeah, MAGA loves it.
And so they're going to keep feeding it to him.
They love talking about Joe Biden.
And then as what Kevin just said, we're going to say the mass media, ABC and CBS, and they wasn't going to tell you about it. They wasn't going to see they're liars. There's fake news. They're fake news. They're fake news. And they're going to keep it going. And that's my opinion, how they're using this to politicize it, to destroy the mainstream media.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And MAGA just loves sitting around talking about the Bidens and the Biden crime family. And Joe Biden was two things at the same time. Number one, he was Lex Luthor. He was like in the kingpin, all rolled into one, and Kaiser Sose, like the head of some vast criminal empire, and he had his fingers in everything. While simultaneously, he was just sleepy Joe Biden who didn't even know what day it was. And, he was eating all this food out of a straw. I mean, you can't have it both ways. To me, the whole conversation about Joe Biden, I think it's fair, but at some point it became ageism. It was just straight ageism. We knew he was old when we elected him. Mm-hmm. He was already slowing down. We knew that. And I think ageism is equating somebody slowing down in terms of their ability to communicate and their brain slowing down. Because maybe it's just me, but Sleepy Joe did a heck of a better job than what we're dealing with right now. It was way more smoother back then.
I don't agree.
Than what it is right now on all levels. So I never saw anything in terms of like the country with, let's say, for instance, you had all these aviation problems where the FAA wasn't working properly because the administration had made so many cuts and didn't understand what they did. That never happened under Joe Biden. Like if that had happened under Joe Biden, then I would say, well, dang, maybe there's something too. Maybe he is getting slow. That never happened under Joe Biden.
That's important to
so
you.
I always felt like the conversation was just piling on because when he got in front of the cameras, he was a little bit slow. Obviously, he would drift off. The man is damn near 80. You know what he is.
That was important to you, but what important to most people was immigration and how he dropped the ball on immigration, and he just let 20 million immigrants come in. You know what I'm saying? So the economy and interest rates, those were things that people were, when Joe Biden got up there and on top of those issues, he wasn't cognitively able to articulate himself properly. Throwing those things on top of it, plus the immigration problems in Chicago and all these cities, and then them using the mainstream media to bank to do that. It was just Joe Biden was a horrible. It was like a cocktail of just whatever, just to get him out of the way.
But that's politics. Yeah. That's what you do. You take every weakness that your opponent has and you try to exploit it. And Joe Biden, one of his major weaknesses, aside from some of the policy issues that he had, was his age. Was the age that he was, and they were going to play on that, and they were going to try to make you think like, man, if you elect this guy, he's not going to get through another 4 years, and then look what you're going to be left with. And on Trump's side, they felt like the Kamala Harris was a loser. Like they felt like most Americans wouldn't want her as their president, and so they really tried to play on that. You know, her diminished capacity from what they were trying to say was her intelligence and IQ level and ability to get things done. Joe Biden, it was, hey, he was old, he's not all there mentally. You know, and Joe would occasionally give you some things that would, you know, that would support that, you know, kind of like his debate performance. So, you know, that's politics. That's what they do. That's what the Democrats do it in a different way, you know, with Donald Trump. And so it's not surprising. You know, the bigger thing to me on Joe Biden's health thing, and again, this is why we should be concerned, is that Joe Biden is not like you or I in terms of how often we might get checked, the quality of the doctor or doctors who are seeing us, check us. And so I think what is kind of really troubling with this cancer diagnosis is, and I think most of the physicians who have commented in on this at the stage that he's in now, like this is not something that happens overnight. Like this was a progressive thing. And so you have to wonder, like, were they not testing Joe Biden? And I think I heard Sanjay Gupta on TV sort of talking about, you know, hey, when you get a certain age, they might not run certain PSA tests or Gleason tests or things of that nature on you if you're at a certain age. But you would almost think like if you were a presidential candidate, that you would be getting all the tests, right? Like the president would be getting all of the tests because of the level of importance that he has and what he means to the country. And so I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, like right now, like if the president of the United States ain't getting the ultimate work over, like what's up with that? Like why is that the case, and why is that not happening? Why is somebody not as important as the president not getting the full workout? Like, why would you skip tests on somebody like that? And I think that's a legitimate question that I think, you know, not just for Joe Biden, but I think for future presidents that you would want to, you know the answer to.
Yeah, and I hear you on that, but here is the hypocrisy in terms of living in the age of Trump. We all know that Trump is in total control of the information that comes out from his official sort of annual checkups. We all know he ain't built like Tom Brady. He's not 6'2", 228. So we're not getting the truth in terms of his favorite food is McDonald's. There's no way you're telling me that the information that we're getting, where they always say his health is beautiful, he's more fit than Tarzan. That's a big lie, and the media just goes along with it.
Tarzan was, but that's an interesting point. But please continue.
But check it. We all know that's a lie, but the media just goes along with it. But yet I'm supposed to be concerned about Biden's health, and he ain't even a president. It just don't add up.
Because you have no way.
I'm refusing.
You have no way to prove otherwise, right? Like you can think at it. You can think like a dude that eat McDonald's every day can't be healthy. You know what I'm saying? Like there's that McDonald's every day and good health don't match. But short of getting his medical records, and this was the thing that I always used to say about Joe Biden, is like you have no way of proving it other than to see the guy's medical records, whether that's Joe Biden or Trump. You just got to take their word. If you're in the media, how do you counter that? How do you report to the public that Donald Trump ain't healthy, or Joe Biden is really losing his mental faculties, and say that with any kind of medical degree of certainty without seeing his medical records or interviewing the physicians who are examining him? And they're not going to talk because of HIPAA. They're not going to. So like all of this is just speculation and what people think. There's no concrete proof that anybody has, the media or anybody outside of that person, their doctors and the people in their circle, who actually can speak with any kind of medical certainty or authority about anybody's level of health.
Nah, nope. I'm using the eye test, just like we do in sports. There's no way in the world that you're going to tell me that Donald Trump is like at the pinnacle of human fitness for his age. I don't.
And I would add on, I agree with Nathan. I would add on, I think not always, but when you look at someone, videos of them and giving speeches and stuff, you get a pretty decent impression, not just so much of their physical health, but their mental health. I mean, sorry, no psychiatric degrees, but when I listen and watch Donald Trump, I think the guy's crazy. I mean, I think forget the policies. The guy is crazy. Okay. And this world and this country is going to pay for it.
So Phil, as a prosecutor, you take that into court. Hey, I think Donald Trump's crazy. How's that going to sit with you with a judge and a jury?
I'm not. No. Well, let me say
this is what I'm saying. Like, you can use the eye test. You can give your opinion. I'm just saying it's all speculation. You can't look at Donald Trump and say, "Oh, dude eat McDonald's every day. He must have congestive heart failure," or like
I'm talking about. I'm more interested
diagnosis.
in the mental condition myself. I'm not as concerned.
You're saying somebody is out of shape. Okay, I could probably say that based on looking at you. But to say you got diabetes or some sort of medical condition,
I'm talking about the psychiatric or the mental.
Nobody ever made that argument.
But these are the types of things that people were trying to say about Joe Biden. I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make. Is like, you can't say the guy's in cognitive decline because he stumbles over a few words, or maybe he's forgetful, or even if dude falls asleep in a meeting. None of those things are signs of definitive medical signs of cognitive decline. It may be signs that you old. It may be signs that you just sleepy on a particular day.
But do you want that as the face of your country?
Right. But these are things politically people take and try to run with, and then they just want to say definitively, like, oh, Joe Biden was. Now, like Ronald Reagan, we knew, like, Ronald Reagan was out of it at the end of his last term. I mean, he was already, the dementia, the Alzheimer's, whatever it was that he had, he was already slipping at the end. And not only could you see it, but it eventually turned out to be a medical fact, sort of after the fact, after he got out. So you actually have had a president, who was kind of running the country for the latter part of his term, who did not have his mental faculties. That basically Nancy Reagan was running the country.
Yeah, that's the worst thing that ever happened.
So let's move on. Good conversation. Just so people know, the Trump administration has settled with the family of Ashley Babbitt, and it's being reported that the Ashley Babbitt family is going to be awarded nearly $5 million of taxpayer money. Now, remember, Ashley Babbitt, white female, was a January 6th insurrectionist, and she was shot and killed because she was trying to break down a door. She was shot by Capitol Police. Someone suggested that she didn't die, she would have been charged, and therefore she would have been actually exonerated. Pardoned, shall I say, not exonerated, pardoned by Donald Trump. But her family now is going to receive $5 million. How do you feel about this?
I don't think there's anything different between that and what we were talking about earlier about Hinton raising some money. Like, there's no difference. I mean, like, they're about to get. She's getting money. She's getting money, but it's taxpayer money. There's taxpayer money, so that's different. That's a different part of it. I don't think it should come from the taxpayers. But if they're going to take care of her, I mean, they're going to take care of her. So it's the taxpayer thing. That's the part that throws me off. But other than that, I think they're going to take care of her. Let her get taken care of.
Get taken care of for what? For being a criminal?
Yeah.
Only white people get to storm the Capitol, try to break in, get killed, and their family get $5 million.
But you got to look at you got to take that in context. That the only reason she's getting this settlement is because of who's in the White House.
Yeah,
this is just an extension. This is just I guarantee you, if Biden or Kamala Harris had won, the family wouldn't be getting a dime. They would still be trying to.
Did George Floyd's family get money? Did George Floyd's family get any money?
Are you trying to compare the two, Tarris? Come on.
I'm saying money given to people out there like that. We can't pick and choose who's allowed to.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, because there are a lot of people who support the January 6er lady. A lot of people support this Bobbitt. So if I don't agree with it coming from the taxpayers, I'll say that. I don't agree with it coming from the taxpayers. But if it was like a GoFundMe or rights that they're going to get, or if they found if they won a civil suit and it has to be paid for a civil suit, there's no different. You cannot pick and choose, but say this person deserves to get money and this person doesn't. But we can agree that it's because Donald Trump's in office that she gets it. But we can't pick and choose and say, oh, the racist lady, she doesn't deserve to raise the money. Oh, but the Bobbitt lady, she does.
It's not. You're confusing fundraising with
I think I understand what
basically settling a lawsuit.
I think I understand what Tarris is. I think I understand what Tarris. Strangely, I think I understand what Tarris is.
I don't.
So here's exactly what I'm going to say here, because this goes back to an earlier point. Her side was trying to argue that she posed no threat, to the officers who shot her. And here's what I said. The officer told her, aside from the fact that they were breaking the law by storming the Capitol, that's the first threat that they presented.
And knocking down that door at the time.
Secondly, they told her and everybody else, back your butt up away from the door. She did not comply. She was still trying to crawl through the door. She got popped. Sad. Wish she hadn't died. But she did not listen to the officer's orders. She did not comply. And that led to her death. That goes back to my earlier point.
Oh,
yes, it does,
God,
Nathan.
Don't do it.
Look, you're going to say it's different. You're going to say it's different. But my point stands. When you don't comply with what law enforcement people with a gun say, more often you're going to receive that bullet. Now, her family was trying to make the argument, hey, she didn't pose a threat to the officer. She didn't have a gun. She didn't even have a gun. So they're making the argument that, like, hey, this was a wrongful death. When you don't comply, chances are you probably gonna die, especially if you Black. Like, I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that you deserve it. But I'm saying that it's part and parcel to when the police give you an order, you need to listen to that order, whether you agree with it or not. Because the alternative is a bullet.
You chose the wrong time to make that point.
And are we talking about compensation? Are we talking about compensation and who deserves that compensation?
To make that point.
Who deserves compensation? I think that what we're talking about.
Yeah, we are talking about it on some levels, but Timothy's right. She wasn't fleeing, Kevin. That's what makes that point terrible. She wasn't fleeing.
No, my point was not necessarily whether she was fleeing or whatever. It's the compliance. So it's like when they told her to back up, she kept coming forward.
Because she was trying to charge through a closed door.
To freeze or to stop.
And you're running away. You should not get shot, Kevin.
You're missing the point. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not saying that you deserve to get a death sentence behind that. You're missing my point. I'm saying when you don't comply, it increases the likelihood of that bad eventuality happening to you. So I'm
right, especially when you're Black in the racist system.
Absolutely.
Like the United States. Yeah, we get that. But that's not the point. Right, what Ashley Babbitt was doing and what Ryan Hinton was doing is two completely different things.
But
she was actively in the middle of a siege trying to break down a window, and the officer with the gun pointed at her face because she's trying to get at him, gave her multiple warnings, and then she tried to go in and shot her. Ryan Hinton was running away. The context means everything.
Well, I'm not likening the context of the situations. I'm likening what I'm saying is that when you don't comply with police orders, whether you're fleeing or whether you're coming at them, you are going to embolden them to take what action they feel like. If they feel like that's a threat, if they feel like that's a threat, and that's the case that they're going to make.
Nope. You do not get to, as a police, you should not be allowed as a police officer to make the determination that a fleeing suspect is a threat to you just because you say it is.
Well, the court of law ultimately will determine that, but that's exactly what the officer is going to say.
Well, no, but police policy determines that. You can't shoot an unarmed man in the back that's running away from
technically,
just because, or an armed
Ryan
man
hitting one shot in the back.
He was shot in the side, which to me is just like the back. It's just like the back. There's no difference. No, it's not, David.
I understand what you're trying to say, but the side is not the back.
There's no. But what's the difference though? What's the difference?
That's not for me to answer. I'm not. Again, I'm not a ballistic.
He was running away from the officer.
Huh?
He was running away from the officer.
If he was running away, he would have been shot in the back.
No, he was running from the side. You can see it clearly on the video. The officer was like,
the fact that he was shot in the side, you don't know what he did immediately before he was
Yes,
shot
I do, because we saw the video.
Oh, come on.
We saw the video. Unless they edited it out. We can at least see that part.
Should they get
the young man, Ryan,
remember what I read,
was clearly running away.
That Supreme Court case says it isn't what you would do or anybody would do, or even a reasonable officer would do in hindsight. It is what a reasonable officer in that officer's position would perceive as a threat.
Should the Hinton family receive money? That's a good question.
They're going to receive money. They're going to receive money.
So why shouldn't the Babbitt family? Why shouldn't the Babbitt family receive money if they have deemed it a wrongful death? Just
because
like
she was the aggressor.
You can't pick and choose. That's my point. You cannot pick and choose.
Case by case.
Some people might think that
you can't pick and choose.
But some people might think that Babbitt was a hero. They might look at her as a hero, and she deserves more than $5 million. And there's people out there.
There's a lot of people that think. There's a lot of people that think that Charles Manson is a hero. They romanticize him. They follow him. That don't mean we should pay attention to them because they think that. You can clearly see on the video that Ashley Babbitt was the aggressor. She was told multiple times by Capitol Police they didn't want to shoot that woman. She was presenting herself as a threat at that particular point during a siege on the Capitol. She got what she was looking for. It's unfortunate.
To MAGA, she's a martyr.
I feel for
to MAGA, she's a martyr, and she deserves.
You're right.
To MAGA, she's a martyr.
You're right about
so
that.
I'm saying to MAGA, she's a martyr.
You're right.
And to other people, is going to look at people who are like the Hinton compensation. So you can't pick and choose. You can't say, "Oh, well, she doesn't deserve to get this money." You can't say that. I mean, you can, but my argument is you shouldn't be able to.
People will say the same thing. People will say the same thing about Hinton. Ultimately, when the city, and this is where I was saying I kind of agree with what Tarris was saying. You don't have to like it, but it's the truth of the matter. I said a couple pods ago that there are several things that are predictable out of this case that even before it's resolved, you can predict what's going to happen. And one of those things is going to be that the Hinton family is going to receive some type of monetary settlement as a result of this. It is almost guaranteed that is going to happen. And there are going to be people in this city who are going to say that they don't think that the Hinton family should get one single dime. And there will be a lot of people in the Black community who will say, absolutely, they should have got paid because it was a wrongful death. And so to Tarris's point, there are going to be people in MAGA who are going to say, hey, this is justice. She should have got that $5 million. And if you don't agree with the attack on the Capitol, and you're going to say she got what she had coming to her. I think that's the nature of these types of.
There's a difference. Let me show you. Having been through a lot of these when I was on city council, there's a lot of situations where you have a police shooting and the officer's totally exonerated, there's blah, 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 but they still pay a judgment. And I think they do that. The reason is because the standard for a so-called civil judgment is much lower than it is for the issue of whether the officer broke the law or committed a crime, that kind of thing. So it is somewhat understandable that an officer is exonerated, that the family still gets money. However, and I can tell you from my experience in the city of Cincinnati, those settlements were not based on political stuff. It was based on the city solicitor determining that if they go to court, they're going to end up paying this amount, so it's better to pay this. The difference here with this Ashley Babbitt thing is, I think, and Kevin said this, I don't think any lawyer worth his salt told the government, you better settle with her because Ashley Babbitt could win a huge verdict. No, this was strictly something that Donald Trump told him to do. And that's why it's particularly unjust.
Correct. Exactly. Right. It's not based upon the evidence, right? It's based upon the politics.
Even a civil suit evidence. It doesn't match. It doesn't go to that level. As you said, Nathan, this she was breaking down the door. And what was she breaking down the door for? To just have a little view of the Capitol? No, they were committing acts of violence.
Oh yeah, they would have hurt a lot of people they got in there. But again, I thought it was terrible though. I didn't take any. I mean, these were just human beings. These are human. I mean, I might disagree with them politically, but even though I was outraged by it, I didn't take any. Man, that was terrible to see somebody, or anybody, get hurt during January and stuff like that. But it's just a heartbreaking situation. So, for her grieving mother, I'm happy for her. You know what I mean? This woman lost her daughter. Her daughter did it to herself, but she getting a big bag of money. Okay, great. It could be worse things in the world. I do think it's a travesty in terms of I just think about all the other people out there that should have got payoffs. And here we are talking about Ryan Hitton. And something tells me that if there is a payoff, it'll probably be a lot less than $5 million. Right. So it's like the worth of life. You can see the difference between, who the victim is.
What has been the average? What have been the payouts in the past for settlements that families have gotten from the city of Cincinnati? I don't know offhand. I don't even know if that's been a matter of public record or not in terms of what the settlement amount.
Well, it's public record. I believe it. I'm quite sure it's public record, if I recall. First of all, it kind of over a period of like 20 years, it obviously with inflation things change. Okay, but usually when you hear about it, it's in either hundreds of thousands or it's in the millions. It's kind of one or the other.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say maybe I would have, if you would have asked me, I would have said at least a couple mil probably is what they would get. And again, that's a total spitball number on my part in terms of what they could possibly be looking at. You're right. It's probably not going to be. It probably won't be 5 million, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't remember, but do you remember Remember the DuBose killing by the cop who had 2 jury trials and they couldn't reach a verdict? I'm recalling, but I'm quite sure his family got a very high settlement. Is that what you guys recall?
Yeah,
in that case, I think
so.
He did. His family.
I never think it's high enough.
Well, I mean, you can't put a price on a life, and I mean, lives are priceless, really. I mean, so no amount of money that any family is going to get is going to replace, the loss of a loved one. I mean, the only thing that money typically can do is just make life easier for the family from the general survival nature of having to pay bills and just kind of live, but it doesn't do anything to restore the emotional damage.
Yeah, I mean, personally for me, and I think that there should be a standard flat 25 mil that should be paid out to all families who lost their children, family member to an officer who wasn't following the rules, who might have been bending the rules or just being corrupt. Standard 25 mil, we start there. And hit them in the pockets, they'll start making some of this stuff stop, and they'll start making sure that they get the right caliber of people in there. If you start hitting them in the pockets real big,
yeah. Well,
it's never enough.
That's one of the arguments for kind of like qualified immunity. I mean, eliminating some of that. I mean, I think the one thing that people kind of feel is if the financial, unfortunately, sometimes that's what it takes to catch people's attention is hit them in the pocketbook. Enough. If you make it painful enough, sometimes that leads to correction that, just simply trying to appeal to people's heart and minds don't move. And so, holding these police officers personally, individually, culpable, accountable for those sorts of things, including financially, if you believe that can make a difference, I don't disagree with you that you got to make it financially painful enough to where people will take a closer look.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Let's move on. So, so it looks like Trump now is putting pressure on U.S. companies to not pass on the price increases as a consequence of his tariffs onto us, the American consumers. Just real quick before I throw it to the crew, like this whole tariff thing has really exposed a lot of weak points to Trump's administration. It really shows that he doesn't have people around him that can dissuade him from going in bad directions. Because this tariff thing, and anybody who says otherwise, I think is MAGA. They got Trump derangement syndrome, the real Trump derangement syndrome, which means that they can never see anything wrong that Donald Trump does. Because I think all of us can agree this has been an unmitigated mess. This has made the world internationally um, less of the alpha, and has given rise to China's prominence. China is using Trump's isolationism to forge new relationships. Anybody in the world will tell you you're only as strong as your what? Your relationships. It's the same as the United States. And then secondly, this tariff thing makes no sense whatsoever. Like one day he says it's to bring back manufacturing. Okay. Then the next day you announce deals. Well, if it was to bring back manufacturing, what's the point of the deal? Right. so so now Walmart and other companies like Mattel are saying, look, we're going to tell our customers that these price increases are because of you. And Donald Trump, along with his administration, is trying to force companies. That seems unconstitutional to not talk about, their relationships to their consumers. But what's your take on this? Trump says, "Look, you just eat the tariff." But I thought that the other country, I didn't really think this, but this is what Donald Trump has been saying. He has been saying that other countries are going to pay for the tariffs. Well, if other countries are going to pay for the tariffs, why is Walmart raising prices on us? We all know why, but I want to get your take. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we all know Trump was feeding us a line of baloney when he was trying to get American people to recognize. Look, one thing that businesses do is they pass along increased costs onto the consumers. That's standard business practice. If it costs me more to, it's the rare company, it's the rare business that.
Well, it depends how competitive the market
but
is.
Let's just face it. It's the rare company that when it becomes more expensive for them to do business, that they don't say, we're going to raise prices on the consumer. It's either that or they're going to cut back, right? It's one of those two things. And so most businesses are not in the interest of cutting back. And so this was what everybody projected was going to happen. And what Donald Trump wants, I mean, I think he tried to Amazon. I remember, I think it was even a couple of weeks ago that Amazon said they were going to come out, and then Amazon got scared and they kind of backed off of it and said, well, that wasn't really supposed to get out. But the reality is these companies want people to understand we're not jacking these prices up on you because we want to. This is a direct product of bad policy, right? And we're not going to absorb it. Now, if Trump wasn't such a bully, and even then, I don't think it would work, but Trump has tried to bully businesses and everybody into capitulating to what he wants. And now he wants to turn around and ask you for a favor. Like, hey, man, take one for the team. You know what I'm saying? To keep the American people off my back. Hell no. After you've been trying to bully me on everything else, what makes you think that I would want to do you a favor and lose money to help you out, dude? No, I'm telling exactly what the deal is. So, what are they calling him now? Donnie Two Dolls? Is that what they call him now? Now that he said that little kids gonna have to get $2 instead of 30 at Christmas. Hey, bro, you just gonna this is the bed you made. Now you're gonna have to lie in it. And unfortunately for us, it means we're going to either have to pay higher prices or go without some stuff.
Donald Trump,
which is only going to depress the economy. And it was never about bringing manufacturing back either. I think the other thing that they said is that, first of all, China and some of these places have been doing some of this manufacturing stuff so long that they have an expertise over there that it would take years to develop in the United States. So this whole thing about bringing manufacturing back to the United States through these tariffs was always smoke and mirrors. It was never going to happen, and it was never going to happen within his term or anytime soon.
I disagree. I think Donald Trump's numbers, or his approval numbers, if you look them up, they're at an all-time high. He's people like him right now. I mean, it dips and goes, but right now it's at a high. It's at highest it's ever been. And I think it's a reason because it's the tariffs, and it's a long-term play to eliminate China from being so dependent on China. Because if you look at the relationships that Donald Trump is forming right now, he's forming relationships that were severed in the past with George Bush and with the Middle East. But then and the Arabs got money. Them Arabs got just as much or more money than the Chinamen. So if he's forming relationships with these people and getting off of China, getting off of the China dependency,
correct,
and getting
rephrase that.
I can say what I want. Getting off the dependency of China and their information and how they got the technology thing on lock and how they've integrated. China has done a very, very good job dominating the information and the technology, the mining of the chips that are needed to produce AI and all those kind of things. So if we get less dependent on China, and we can't forget, China is the reason why we had a pandemic. So if we can get dependent off China and we start going over and forming new relationships with people and if you look at the reason, now I'm going back. Let's go back a little bit, and I have to say it's my buddy, my partner, I can't call the Congress from Kentucky, Mitch McConnell, and the relationship that he started with China back in the day, and how he has profited so much from the relationship with China and us being, as American society, being dependent on China.
Well, exactly,
and her family. So us being dependent on China, I like the move of tariffing China so much to where they don't want to do business with us and form better relationships with Arab nations who have way more money, way more land, way more resources than little bitty China, who is landlocked. We need to give them less respect and tariff them even more. Let's go 150% tariffs on China. And I do believe that the manufacturing jobs will return to the United States of America.
Yeah, after the apocalypse, and we're and it's a pre-industrial world. Yeah, after the apocalypse, and we electricity.
Or
yeah,
maybe
with
when
hell freezes
over,
right?
One of the
yeah, that's interesting. You look at it that way, man, because I've heard MAGA with that. I mean, that sounds good, but it's the problem with it is that none of the moves that Donald Trump is making could lead to any of the logical conclusions and noble conclusions that I think all Americans would love for. And then when I hear you say, we've got some kind of like China's like got something over us. I just feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding of our relationship. I'm not trying to say I understand it fully, but the fact that we buy a lot of China-made products, and that means that American consumers are getting the products that we want, is not necessarily mean that China's doing something negative to us. I mean, it's a relationship. So I think that Trump and the Republicans have been very wise and very good at playing on people's ignorance about international politics, because you just say you want 150 tariffs. That's not going to hurt China. That would hurt us. So it just speaks to, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what that really means to have a trade deficit and what it really means to be a competitive nation in the 21st century, right? Like everything that we're doing is helping China, because China is now forging relationships with countries that they previously didn't have. And I'll say it again, internationally, you can look at it the same way as your business. If you were starting a business, you'll want to have as many positive and productive relationships with people as possible. It's the same thing with the country. So this whole thing about alienating Canada and Mexico, all of those things are foolish. All that does is take away America's power. What makes America powerful is not our nuclear weapons. It ain't John Wayne and it ain't white folks. It's these long-standing relationships, these economic relationships. That's what makes us great. These geopolitical strategic relationships where we get information about terrorists because they like us and they tell us, that's what makes us safe. So everything I see Trump doing, this isolationism, is, in my humble opinion, the exact wrong thing to do. We should be engaging. We should be making friends. If that means smiling when you don't want to, we all do it. We all do it in business and interpersonal relationships. The international relationship with this country is no different. And Trump is mismanaging all of that so we can put on a show where he's John Wayne and the big tough guy.
Here's something to keep in mind. I may have said this before. When I was a prosecutor, most of my work was doing white collar crime. And what I learned, because I dealt with a lot of con guys, and what I learned about con men is they never can think long term. Okay? They just can't. Okay? It's always the immediate buck. And anybody who thinks that Donald Trump has got some grand plan here, you're kidding yourself. I listen to some of these kind of so-called conservative Ben Shapiro types. Oh, wow, Trump was really smart now that he's getting these deals. He's shrewd, but he is not smart. He has no long-term plan. But that's the difference between us and China. The Chinese, they think long-term. They think 10 years out. Donald Trump
they're thinking 500 to 1,000 years out. They're thinking their children's children. That's what they're thinking. And that's what we should be thinking. We should be thinking about when we are all gone. Do we want this country? Do we want our great grandchildren? Do we want our lineage to exist? And do we want to be on top? And what does that even mean in the 21st century anymore? But all this He-Man alpha guy, they call him, man, that is the television show for Fox News. And it means absolutely zero because real intelligent men don't bark. They're not beating their chests. The real guys that really make things happen, the real thinkers are quiet. They're not beating their chest saying rah, 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 and kiss the ring. They don't do that. They don't move like that. And so you can just look at Trump and how he moves and you can tell. Just like Phil said, this guy is just, it's moment to moment. It's moment to moment. Like he needs to feel a certain way moment to moment. And it's based on his childhood. I mean, let's call it what it is. We're dealing with a very privileged white male who grew up in a bad household. That's what happened. His mom was bad to him. His father was bad to him, and he had privilege. So he's never had to actually deal with the problems that he created. And now this person is 80 years old. He's pissed off because of the lawsuits and the attempts to put him in jail, and he's got all the power of the United States president, and we've got to deal with it.
But I got to make an interesting point. One interesting point. You guys said that about Donald Trump and his campaigning strategies and all that kind of stuff. He's going on these podcasts and he's doing all this stuff that was so unorthodox, but it worked tremendously by listening to his sons, by listening to his younger sons. Same thing that Joe Biden is.
I'm sorry, Trump. Are you talking about Trump's sons? Excuse me, Trump's sons, Uche and Uday, or whatever their names are. You're talking about Trump. You're talking about Eric.
He's right though. I think it was Barry Trump actually.
When they're over there and they're in the Middle East and they're forming these relationships with these Arab princes they're forming these new relationships. You're talking. You all said it's like the Bidens, didn't do it for themselves. Business. Like the Bushes didn't do that for themselves. Like all of these presidents, that's what they do. Like the Obamas didn't set themselves up for a financial future after they got out of that thing. While the powers that be are writing the scripts as we go along. I mean, if the Trumps want to go over to the Middle East and they don't want to deal with the Chinese for the reasons that I just said. Chinese are in Africa and all these places mining resources to make sure that the iPhones work, that your iPhones and all your AI and all this stuff that make our businesses move smoothly. China's over there mining it. If we are an information technology civilization, and if we can't compete and we are at their beck and call whenever we need it, they could cut that stuff off. And Donald Trump are saying, "Oh, we're going to find another way to get that stuff." That's where I'm saying. That's where I'm at with it. It's not like it's a long-term play.
You talk about the Trump family business, or you talk about the U.S. government?
Both. They're going to both. Like if you talk about what I was talking about, the Trump family business. I'm talking about the Trump family. The Trump family business is using their family business to form different relationships to get off the dependency that China has a hold on us for. That's what they're doing. They're doing it for both. Why wouldn't they do it for both? And then they have all.
They're doing it.
Then they have all the information technology whizzes behind them. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, all these people who depend on these chips that are being minded by the Chinese over in Africa and over in these other countries that they're taking advantage. So they're making a different play. Just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean it's not going to work. Just like you guys said, Donald Trump's going on these Joe Rogan podcasts,
are you talking about
doing all this stuff and doing all these?
Question: are you talking about the Trump private business, or his sons? You guys know this. They announced major businesses in all three of those countries. Okay, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. They went in there. I mean, it wasn't even subtle. Like 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week before, and they announced these huge resort developments. Okay, and then in the United Arab Emirates, they are investing. The UAE is investing like $2 billion in Trump's cryptocurrency scam. Okay, now what I'm trying to understand from you, Tarris, is I get where that is enriching his family, and by him going there, he's basically pumping up. But explain to me what that has to do with our country.
The same reason.
Well, Tarris is trying to represent. Tarris is trying to represent. Wait a minute, Tarris. Let me get in. Let me get in here. What he's trying to represent is that somehow Trump and his family, by enriching themselves, is also helping America, which is the biggest load of crap that I think I've ever heard. I don't disagree in principle. I don't disagree. Well, that's exactly what he's doing, because what they're doing is it's helping them. It's not helping our country, because they're not forging any kind of relationships that is creating anything that's going to benefit the average working American here. But it is going to benefit them, not unless you plan on going over to Dubai or wherever, or working at one of the Trump resorts over there. America's not going to benefit from one single thing. I don't disagree with what you're saying in principle, in terms of the approach that the United States needs to have with regard to its dependency on China and the products that they produce. But look, Americans enjoy cheap products. Okay, and this is the one thing that you've got to recognize about the playing field that we're playing on. We just got done talking about tariffs and the increased prices of things. Americans love their cheap TVs. They love their cheap cell phones. They love all of these cheap items that are being produced overseas in these other places. And why can they produce them so cheaply? Cheap labor. They do not have to adhere to the rules and regulations that we have to adhere to here in the United States. They also can steal intellectual property, manipulate their currency. They are not playing by the same rules that we play by here in the United States. So we are at a tactical disadvantage that almost makes it, I won't say makes it impossible, but it makes it very difficult to do the same kind of business here in the United States the way that they do it over in China. Because you're just not going to come here. And I mean, you got unions in the United States. You've got OSHA and safety regulations, and people have to be able to work under certain types of conditions. They don't worry about any of that stuff over in China. And so I have not heard Donald Trump articulate any kind of plan or any kind of strategy that is going to help the United States overcome that and still deliver the cheap products here in Americans that Americans love. Right. Because I doubt very seriously people going to want to pay $1,500 for a cell phone.
I think the whole dependency on China thing is really more political rhetoric, right? Whether it's primarily I hear this from Republicans, but I'm sure it's probably been some Democrats as well. They try to weaponize the whole relationship with China to try to win elections. I just feel like we even talk about it wrong. Like, if you want to look at China in terms of the fact that they're buying so much of our debt as a problem, that's one thing. But if they're a trading partner and they've got skilled labor or whatever, and we buy products from them, I just feel like the way we talk about that relationship should be different. But the politicians weaponize whatever they have to weaponize in order to win elections. I get it. I understand it. But for Tarris, I mean, can you tell me how, right now, Donald Trump, there's a lot of news about him possibly accepting a gift from Qatar of this big plane. He wants to make it Air Force One. And then after his term in office, then it's going to go to his personal presidential library, and he can still use it to fly around the world. How does that benefit the American people?
I don't agree with that, but I will answer the question about what I was asked before. Every president.
Well, hold on. Don't gloss past. So can we admit that it only benefits him? This plane.
I don't know if they're giving him a plane so he can move. If that's what the if they have the capability when he comes to their country and say this is how you can move around when you're over in the Middle East. You can move around like this, and you can leave this here, or you can take it. This is a gift, and we can afford to give you this gift. If you want to have this gift and you want to take this gift, you take the gift if you want to. I don't think
so. We both agree it would be a gift.
It's a gift.
Both agree it's a gift just for Donald Trump.
If he wants to use it for that, but he's saying that he wants to give it to his library, if that's what they want to do, if that's the dowry that they want to get to kiss the ring so they can do business with the Trump family, I don't have a problem with that. Hold on. So I don't have a problem more than what the Bushes and the Halliburtons and with all.
Don't bring them into it.
They did nothing different. They did nothing
different.
Don't try
to bring them into it. Let's just talk about Trump.
I'm saying these people try to kill my daddy and then going after them and then using that warmongering stuff to make money and create a military industrial complex system that they're still making money off of to this day. Right. The Bushes and the McCain and all those people.
So
it's no different than what the Trump and them are doing right now.
It's a lot different.
I don't say I agree with it, but it's no different.
It's a lot different. It's a lot different.
We're not even going to war. The Bushes used war and used the military complex system to gain wealth. The Trumps are just using they're using their entertainment and all their ways
to make money. That's a whole nother issue, Tarris.
The Bushes use it.
If this was Joe Biden, you wouldn't be making all these excuses, bro. Ain't no way. There, you making every excuse in the book. You just admitted that this plane from Qatar is a gift to Donald Trump. So you got the United States president who's overseas receiving personal gifts on the taxpayer dime. He's supposed to be doing the taxpayer business, but he's getting personal gifts. But because he's your guy, you don't care. If that was Joe Biden, you'd be at the Capitol already.
No.
You'd be at the Capitol.
But this is the standard fallacy in arguments like Tarris is like people automatically, like people like Tarris and other Republican types, they always go to the everybody else was doing it as if that is
called whataboutism.
Yeah, as if that somehow or another inoculates Donald Trump from doing blatantly like okay, look, I'll even give it to you, Tarris, because I'm skeptical too that you haven't had some politicians who haven't cashed in. Some certainly do it after they get out of office. Most usually wait to do that. But Donald Trump is just so blatant with it. Like he doesn't even, the emoluments clause be damned. I'm going to take this plane. I'm going to hawk all these wares straight out of the White House. Like I'm not going to divest myself from any of my businesses. In fact, I'm gonna keep on building stuff, even while I'm the president of the United States. And the fact that people who support him turn a blind eye to that and don't care, it erases any credibility that you have on any other issue that you want to argue about. Because if you're willing to turn a blind eye to that type of corruption and say, because this is my guy, it doesn't matter, then you've ceded any kind of moral ground on any other issue that you want to argue. So how can you stand on righteous indignation on any other issue when you'll admit that you support a guy who will take gifts from foreign countries who support terrorist networks, and you don't see a problem with that? You don't see the hypocrisy? You don't see how you don't have a leg to stand on anything else you want to argue against, whether it's Democrats or whomever, because you are morally compromised.
I'm not a huge Donald Trump fan. I've said that openly. I'm just anti-Kamala Harris. I was anti-Kamala Harris. We get what we get with Donald Trump. That's just who he is. I'm not saying I would support this guy 100%. I voted for him against Kamala Harris. I've said that over and over on this program. So I'm not the typical Donald. I will criticize him where criticism is due. But I don't think this is blood in your hands, Tarris. You still got blood in your hands. Just because I vote, I don't believe that. I believe I would have more blood on my hands with the illegal immigration situation. our Americas and how I'm very happy with my vote.
Yeah. So you're responsible.
So let me. Yeah. I just don't understand people who will say, well, I'd rather vote for a corrupt liar than somebody I just don't like, than somebody I don't like their laugh, or I don't like this, that, or the other. But I will vote for somebody who I know is corrupt, who I know is a liar, who I know is a convicted felon. I just don't understand where logically in somebody's mind you say that person is better than somebody I just kind of don't like. Like,
I don't like Rachel Dolezal.
Like,
I didn't like Rachel Dolezal. I didn't like that. We went through that whole thing. We went through the whole thing already about her. About it wasn't the fact that
like Tarris, you wouldn't work for you wouldn't accept that from a boss on your job. You would say, I don't want to work for. If you work for a guy who was a liar, who was a cheat, you probably wouldn't work for him. You probably wouldn't want to work for a company where they were at. But you'll accept that from a president. That is the madness. That is the madness.
On the same token, I believe that Joe Biden was a liar and a cheat. I believe that Joe Biden was a racist. I believe that Joe Biden was all those things that you named Donald Trump to being. I truly believe that Joe Biden was the same exact way. There's no difference between Joe Biden or Donald Trump, either of them. And the worst of them, the worst of them all would have been Kamala Harris. And the worst would have been Kamala Harris. That's why I lean toward Donald Trump on this one all the way. The fact that she was a Democrat and she was not even qualified at all for that job.
Yeah, that's totally not true. She was probably been the most qualified person ever if she was elected president. And this country would be in a better way. But that's why I say, when I say that since you just admitted that you voted for Trump, and see, stop the routine, because sometimes you put this little mask where you want to act like you didn't really roll with Trump. That's your guy.
I voted for him.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's different though, because you be trying to say, yeah, I voted him, but I don't really rock with him. Yeah, you rock with him. You're MAGA, and blood is on your hands. And so you are partially responsible for all the pain that he causes. You, especially for black
people. He's not causing pain. He's causing pain to you. He's causing pain to you and your side. He's not causing pain to me. I'm happy. A lot of people. His approval rating is higher now than it's ever been. So if I wasn't on this programming, you guys would be in an echo chamber talking about in the same thing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm saying this is my divergent point to say that I'm happy with Donald Trump and his presidency. I was just saying, you guys can say I got blood on my hands, but I'm saying I'm happy with it. It's you three people whose candidate lost who are saying that I got blood on my hands. What I'm saying, Tarris,
is I know that you're cool with blood on your hand. I'm cool with telling you got it on your hands. Is what I'm saying. I get it. I know you ain't got no issues with what you did. I'm just telling you that I see you for what you are. You got blood on your hands. Period.
I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Quit acting like, oh, I don't really rock with Donald Trump. No, you do. This is your boy. You love everything he's doing. Like you said, you ain't got no problem with it, but he's hurting.
I don't love everything he's doing. I don't love everything he's doing. I think he's rushing into a lot of things, but I think it's his first 100 days, like we talked about in this program before. The first 100 days, he had to just throw everything out there like he could. And now for the rest of the 3 years, he's going to be fighting court cases, fighting Supreme Court, trying to get people elected, going on his little tour, his narcissistic tour. But Donald Trump's presidency has been no different than anybody else's presidency, except Donald Trump in our lifetime. We got to see him do it twice. We got to see him take the first approach. Then he got beat. Then he had another approach, and he's doing everything that he should have did the first time, the second time.
Clearly, you're living in a different universe.
Here's what I would just ask anybody, whether you voted for Donald Trump or not, is to objectively look at your life and ask yourself, is my life any better off today, 100 days later after his election, than it was before? And I can honestly say that at a minimum, I see no discernible difference, and at worst, it's probably my life is probably a little bit less than it was before Donald Trump got elected. All of this other stuff that you're talking about, whether you're talking about the border or anything else like that, like Tarris, most Americans are not seeing that show up in any discernible way in their daily life. Zero. So as much as people talk about so I have yet to see Trump sealed up the border. I have yet to see where that has made any kind of discernible difference in the employment numbers, the job growth, or any of the things that they associate with the immigration problem, right? I haven't seen any crime statistics that Trump or anybody has put out to say that since we stopped all of these immigrants who are coming across the border of Joe border, since they've locked it up tight. The reality is that the stuff that Trump loves to talk about, you're seeing no discernible difference in your life. And if anything, you're seeing a little bit less because you've lost in your 401k because of what he's done with the tariffs and all of that stuff, and you're scraping trying to get that back. What has he done to improve the lives of working Americans in his time? Not a single thing.
Nothing. Made everything worse across the board. And again, that's just my opinion, but all worse. And we're just getting started. We're just getting started. So the long-term impact, we don't even know what that is yet. Even the tariffs, the impact of the tariffs, let alone the overall mood of the country. It just feels like there's a stress on a lot of people. That's going to start impacting people's lives over the next couple of years. You know, people are going to have some real serious health consequences because of dealing with the stress. You know, you got 150,000 more people that are going to lose their jobs during the Trump administration from the federal government. We don't know what the impact on our neighborhoods is going to be yet. We don't know yet. Some of those people don't get unemployment benefits. We don't know what the impact is going to be when those unemployment benefits run out. You have no idea. People losing union membership. We don't have no idea. Let alone to say, you know, Trump's overall interest in becoming a dictator. We don't know. That's the fun part. Let's see if he's able to do it, right? All this fun since Trump's been elected. So we shall see.
But yeah, I mean, if you look in the comments, people talk about, and again, this is my point. How has he made people's lives better? He hasn't. You know, people are talking about businesses closing, losing their jobs. Like this is the report after 100 days of Trump's job losses, business closing, increased prices. Now he has made a modicum of adjustment on inflation, you know, but it's minuscule, right? Like it's not even probably really even super quantifiable in terms of how he's moved the needle on inflation. And you're right, Tarris, his approval rating is higher than it's ever been. But when your approval rating is constantly in the toilet, there's nowhere to go but up. So I mean, I'll give you that. Yeah, it's better than it has been because it has been in the toilet. And the biggest part about why he's seen the recent surge is the market sort of stabilized after he got off this insane, 150% tariff crusade that he was on with China. Because what does the market respect? Stability. What has Donald Trump brought in 100 days? Chaos and instability. And that's why the markets have been all over the place. So now when they say, okay, we're going to give this 90-day truce, okay, the markets kind of level out because they're like, well, at least for the next 3 months, we know we're not going to have to deal with anything relatively crazy. So the market's like that. So that's part of the reason why you've seen his approval rating kind of tip up is because he's taking a break from the insanity for 90 days.
Like Phil said that, and Phil said that same thing. And if you talk about the market, if he wanted to change inflation and he wanted to tackle inflation, he could fire I can't remember his name. The guy who escapes me. He could, and the guy in the trade. Yeah, the guy he's
the Fed chair.
In the Fed chair, he probably can't fire him until his term's up in 26.
From what because I watched the man speak. I can't remember his name. I can't remember his
name.
Escapes me.
But Jerome Powell.
He said if he fires me, he just fires me. Trump could put pressure on him to move the needle. Trump's not, for the reason why I disagree with Phil until Phil says that Trump.
He's been putting pressure on Powell for months. He's been doing it for months.
If he wanted to put pressure on him, he would fire him and put in a crony. If Trump wanted to do it, he'd fire him and put in a crony.
He can't fire him though. That's what if Trump could fire him, he would have done it already. But he can't. Trump fire him.
But see, Trump. That's again. This is another thing that Trump does. This is what he does to his people. He blusters about firing the Fed, And then when he finds out he can't do it legally, he'll just say, no, you know what? I'm going to leave him alone. Like, he doesn't say I can't fire him. What he's just going to be like, nah, you know what? I'm going to cut him a break. I'm going to leave him alone. And so that leaves his minions with the mindset that he could still fire him, but he can't. Trump, you know, he either lies overtly or he lies by misdirection or omission to make you think that he never admits his defeat. He'll never say.
I'll admit.
He'll never say I can't fire the Fed. What he'll say is I'll leave him alone for right now.
Correct.
That's
yeah, you're right. You know what? People should check out Mary Trump.
I'll admit
That's his niche. She has a podcast. She has a couple of videos where she breaks down like what it was like to observe Donald Trump growing up. And like I told you, he had two bad parents. It's just like we already know. If you got two bad, narcissistic, emotionally abusive parents, it's going to yield a messed up child. Child is going to grow up a messed up adult. That's what Donald Trump is. And she does a wonderful job of like filling in the gaps. I mean, who would know better than a family member, right? So people should check it out and just kind of look at her analysis. He is a sad little boy. Because when you get traumatized as a child, parts of you never grow up. That's why he acts childish. He is a child, right? He was an abused child. I mean, on some levels, I got some sympathy for him as I would any abused child who's now an adult. But the problem is he's a president, and unfortunately, he's got his finger on the button, so we got to pay attention to what he's doing. Other than that, we just be ignoring him like we used to. We used to just ignore Trump. We knew he was a fool. We knew all these things. But some of these fools like Tarris and his buddies voted for him. So now we got to give him some respect and act like what he says means something. So I blame people like Tarris and I blame Phil's party, the Republican
You were
Party.
really on a vengeance tour, pal. Gee whiz.
And you know what? I just looked it up.
That's why they call him
as of April 25th, as of April 2025, as of this past April, that's whenever. Before then, he could have fired Powell. He could have reassigned someone and put someone in that position. April 2020. So
where you get that from? True Social? What is that? True Social you on right there?
That was Wikipedia, but it says it's a chairman. The chairman as of 2025, he could have got rid of him before April. So that's what I was going off of because I've listened to that guy talk. This is just May. I've listened to him speak a lot of times, and he said, because talking about this interest rate, he said, if Donald Trump gets rid of me, I'll just go do something else. He said, I've heard him say that.
I think you're misquoting. I think you're misquoting him. What he said is he's not going to leave. And with all due respect, I don't know what you're looking at. I am quite sure that his term did not end this past April. I believe it ends in 2026. However, if I may throw one point out, it's a little deep in the weeds, but do you know the reason why Trump backed off on the tariffs? It's the same reason he backed off on trying to get rid of Powell. It's one reason. It's the bond market and the value of the dollar. What I like about this, it's like you can fool everybody. You can pressure Walmart. You can fool a lot of people, but you can't fool the bond market. Okay? And this is the international bond market. And what happened was, for one of the first times in a long time, when he had those tariffs out there, and even more when he was threatening to get rid of Powell, guess what? The bond prices sunk. The yields went up, meaning the U.S. has to pay a lot more to borrow money. And that's what made the difference. And by the way,
who, Phil?
To Trump and the entire country, because Trump and his people recognize that if the dollar, if we lose it being the reserve currency, you talk about inflation? Believe me, you'll see inflation like you've never seen before if the dollar collapses. And that is what scared him. He's smart enough to know that. The people around him are smart enough. When the dollar started to drop and people start selling those treasury bills, and therefore the price just plummets, I'm telling you, that's what scared him.
Phil, who deals mostly in buying and selling these bond treasury bills you're talking about? What other country besides the United States? Name the country who deals in these bonds most? The bonds that you're talking about.
Our bonds?
Yeah. Who buys and trades those more than anybody else?
China owns a ton of them.
Thank you.
So what's your point? The point
Japan
is
is number two.
Point is
the
if the bond price drops,
the dependency on China.
Really,
so if he's
you just don't know.
So I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know I agree with you on the market being determined by the bond market. Then the bond market the bond market is being determined about who makes the most trades in there. China.
Right, but
so we're in a negotiation. We're in a tariff war with them. So we're in a tariff war. So if we're in a war with them, and we're in economic war with them, and they're buying the bonds, why shouldn't we?
You're totally confused. You're totally confused.
Yeah.
They've been buying our bonds for years and years. Nothing's changed. But here's the thing. All China has to do is do a mass sell-off of U.S. bonds. And you know what? You're going to be paying $20 for like a can of spaghetti. Okay?
So the dependency on China, our dependency on China.
One minute. It's like the Bible says. The borrower is the servant to the lender. China's the lender, among others, and we're the borrowers, and they're the ones that hold the cards.
Yeah.
So we're at war with China. So my point is, we need to create less dependency on China. That's my point. That's been my point the entire time. We need to create less dependency on China. And then Phil just went all the way around and said the industry. You want to know why the interest rate's not changing? Because China isn't buying and trading in the bond market because they have so much. They have control of the bond. We need less dependency on China. Because they're the ones. If Phil's just saying, if they're the ones who control who's the buying and the selling in the bond market, and that's what determines the interest rate lowering and going higher and lower, and we need to create less dependency on China to be able to have that much control on our interest rate.
Do you understand that bonds are sold at auction? Do you understand how bonds are sold, U.S. bonds?
You answer my question.
Who's
buying them? Who's at the auction? If nobody's at the auction, if the person with the biggest bankroll is at the auction is the China people, and they're buying them, selling the most, and they're creating dependency on. We are dependent on them how they buy and sell our dollars.
Here's what I would say. I would say again. I think that there is a lot of, even with myself, I think there's a lot of that we don't know. There's just a lack of education about, our international relationships and how they work. I would just say in general that I think that the whole China's presence and how we talk about it has been so politicized that we forget what we should really be focusing on. And that's us. That's the United States. And so when I hear you say dependency on China, yeah, but Japan is the number 2 bondholder. So does that, in a perfect situation, will we have no debt? Yeah. But we're not there yet. But even if that's true, the tariffs and the bond market in terms of our relationship with China have nothing to do with one another. If anything, you can make the argument that Trump's moves with tariffs is a bad decision because of the position that China holds in terms of the bond market, if you really want to bring it up that way. I just feel like the politicians benefit when the people don't have a proper education, and it's clear that we don't have a proper education about how things actually work to make the right decisions. That's what it really comes down to me. But that's all I got, guys. Any last words? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I know it's late. I'll say something real quick. I talked a couple of weeks ago about this Holocaust Center down at Union Terminal, and I talked about the fact that they have these expressions, bystanders and upstanders. Bystanders, people who just go along with stuff, and upstanders are people who stand up. And I did this little podcast yesterday on some it's easy to look back on the Holocaust and say, oh, they should have sheltered the Jews. They should have. But it's not quite so easy to look at and find examples today. It's kind of like Kevin was talking about. We're in a different kind of a world, more selfish, more polarized. But I do think it's important to point out those individuals or groups that are truly upstanders today. And I won't go into all that I mentioned, but one that really impressed me, and I heard about, is a group called Standing Together. Okay. And what this is this is in Israel, but these are Palestinians and Israelis who are working together for peace. And they're not buying the Hamas stuff, and they're not buying what Netanyahu is doing, which is my opinion, an additional genocide on top of what happened to Israel. But I just thought that was a great example. These people are working for peace and for social justice for Israelis and Palestinians. And I just think those are the kind of people we ought to be looking up to.
Yeah, I'm with it. I love it. Anybody else? Any last words? No? Well, to the audience, thank you so much for being here with us, and allowing us to be with you in this digital format. We're planning to be back on Friday at 1 p.m. Got at least one new crew member joining us. I'll tell you all about it, Kevin. And you guys will get a chance to meet with them on Friday. Got some old crew members, some familiar faces, but haven't seen them in a while. Joining us on Friday as well. So should be a hot show. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Have a great week. And we'll talk real soon. Take it easy. Thank you for your time, fellas. Yep, great conversation.